welcome to another insightful episode of Nerds on Tap, where we talk business and tech and get nerdy for an hour. This time we're exploring the fascinating world of home labs and DIY tech setups. Whether you're a seasoned IT professional or just starting out, building and experimenting in your own lab environment is one of the best ways to learn and grow your skills. Join us and our special returning guest, Colby Sullivan, Senior Implementations Engineer at Digital Boardwalk, as we discuss servers, routers, NAS setups, and more. Grab your favorite brew and tune in for a fun and educational episode. So let's welcome Colby Sullivan, who has over 10 years of experience at Digital Boardwalk, specializing in deploying servers, routers, switches, Wi-Fi, email migration, SharePoint deployments, and more. Colby, welcome back to the show.
Thanks for having me, guys. Had a blast the first time. We talked about some electric vehicle news. Now we're going to dive into home labs. Let's go.
Yeah, no, love that segment. I still go back to that to listen to some of the stuff about electric cars. So we do appreciate you coming on way back when we had technical difficulties.
Yeah, that was a fun day.
So today we'll be covering 3 segments, including segment 1, building home servers and virtual environments. Then we'll move on to DIY networking, and we'll wrap it up with how to expand and innovate in your own home lab. We'll conclude at the end of everything with our rapid fire questions. But as always, we must begin with a beer.
Let's go.
So, Edge, what are we drinking? Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Nerds on Tap. I'm your host, Tim Shute, and I couldn't be more excited to embark on this nerdy adventure with all of you. So grab your favorite brew, because things are about to get exciting.
3, 2, 1, go!
All right, guys, so our first beer is the Emerald Coast Ultra Lager by the brewing company Destin Brewery. It's a light-bodied lager with a pale golden color, has a refreshingly crisp taste, and a clean, dry finish. This is the lightest beer they make. Unlike a traditional Kolsch, they remove some of the wheat and replace it with rice for a drier, lighter finish. And this beer has also won a Platinum Award in 2019 for the World Beverage Competition and a Bronze Award in 2019 in the New York International Beer Competition.
You want me to go first?
Yeah, go ahead.
The word I'm thinking of with this is refreshing. This is a refreshing beer. It's not heavy at all.
To me, it's a wholesome beer.
Mm-hmm.
It's got those full-bodied notes in it, so I'm getting that very flavorful, easy sipper beer. That's
very easy to drink.
Yeah, very easy to drink.
And it's from Destin.
Well, that's even better. It's from our neck of the woods.
Yeah.
So good beer to start the show with. Anyway, welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Let's get moving with our first segment. We're going to talk about building home servers and virtual environments. And this is something that Colby is very passionate about. And, you know, I watch you over at Digital Boardwalk tinkering all the time. So very cool to start this show off. So what was your first experience building a home server, and what challenges did you face along the way?
Oh, man. So my first official home server was probably back in the mid-aughts, 2005, 2006, using an operating system called Windows Home Server, which eventually became Small Business Server on the business side.
Yep.
So, I used Home Server to run backups of my desktops at the house. It stored some media for me, long time ago, early days of sort of tinkering with servers, just using standard desktop hardware, but running a server-based OS. So
I think my first home lab now, I mean, I've been fooling around with stuff since the 80s, but my first real home lab didn't come until I think right when I moved to Pensacola, probably late 90s, 98, 99, I started building PCs at home and tinkering around with different ideas of making gaming cases. Because I don't know if you remember, but you couldn't buy just a case with a window. You couldn't get colored cases. You
Right.
couldn't get them with windows.
I had to mod my first one and cut the
Yeah.
thing out and put
What-
the window on. And
What'd you use to cut it?
a Dremel, just cutting wheel. You know, well,
Just a rotozip.
yeah, 4 or 5 of them. You know, because
Yeah.
those steel cases just destroyed those cutting wheels. But yeah, I got through it.
I used a rotozip tool. I would go to Pep Boys and buy window weather stripping that
yeah.
you would use on a car.
I use that too.
And I would run it around the edge, and then I would get plexiglass and
Taking
throw
me
it on
back.
the back and some hot glue.
Yeah, those
Do you remember?
those cold cathode tubes on the inside
Oh,
for the
yeah.
lights and stuff.
Yeah.
Before
And they were
LEDs.
expensive.
Yeah, before LEDs, there was cold cathode, and they were great.
They had a toggle switch.
Yeah.
that was wired into it.
Yep.
And and then they've obviously used what's the technology they're using for those now?
LED strips,
Yeah.
you know, just plugged it right into the motherboard, adjustable, that kind of stuff.
I think that's the first one I remember. So, and then obviously when I was studying for MCSC way back in the day,
I remember doing that.
I had to learn the administration.
Yeah.
So I had to throw a server in there. But PCs was building them, I think, was the first thing I dove into. So for someone new to the concept, now this is a loaded question because I really want to dig in with this with you. For someone new to the concept, how would you explain the benefits of setting up a virtual server environment at home?
Great question. For people who want to learn how to get into different operating systems, like for example, there are plenty of people that know the foundations of networking and computing, but they may not be familiar with Linux, for example. They may get hired on to a firm that specializes in Linux servers. Home labs are a great way to experiment with other operating systems that you're not used to. And Linux is so easy to virtualize. It's so lightweight, free for the most part.
Yeah.
So very easy to experiment with different operating systems.
So being so lightweight, you can pretty much throw it on an old setup or an old rig.
Yeah, in fact, laptops actually work really well as a first home lab server because if you think about it, they have the KVM built in. They've got the keyboard, video, and mouse built in,
Yeah.
right? So, like, let's say you can't afford a rack style server with its own dedicated slide out monitor.
Right.
Your laptop has it built in. It's even got a built in UPS. It's got a battery built in. So laptops are great for that kind of stuff. Throw in a solid state, add some
Yeah.
RAM, you're ready to go.
So, okay. So before I get into any more questions, take us into that world. I mean, so I'm going to take Linux. I'm going to slap it onto a laptop. What am I going to do? What do I do next?
So the software that I use to run my virtualization platform of my home lab is called Proxmox. Proxmox has been around for years. It's Linux based. I believe it is based on Debian, which is your just sort of standard, vanilla Linux flavor.
Yeah.
Ubuntu is also based on Debian.
Yeah.
Debian is very flexible, and I use Proxmox to host some lightweight machines. Like I've got one that hosts a Windows machine that I refer to as my jump box. So basically, if I'm out and about and I need to log into my network, or if something's not working, I can hop into that Windows virtual machine, and then I got access to the whole network from there, right? Rather than leaving my computer on all the time, my gaming rig on all the time,
Right.
I just have a very lightweight, virtualization host that's 6 watts, right?
Right.
And instead of being 250 TDP on my on my Ryzen rig, So I run a Windows VM. I run a virtual machine that does whole home ad blocking. Every single device on my network, phone, tablet, computer, whatever, ads are just not a thing.
They're just killed.
They just don't exist. It's really cool to go to like speedtest.net and see all the ads, around the speedometer.
Yeah.
And then you enable the ad blocker. And this is not software in the browser. This is something built into the network infrastructure.
Okay.
And once you connect to it, you refresh and the ads just disappear like they're never there. It's awesome, dude.
So is it for the audience here,
Yeah.
for someone that has no idea what you're talking about? So this is on a machine between the internet
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
and all the devices that are connected to your LAN.
Exactly.
right?
So the internet comes in. I've got AT&T fiber. I know you're looking forward to getting that.
Well, I'm
installed.
excited. I
Yeah.
see that the cables are poking out of the ground
Yeah.
right now in our neighborhood.
So I've got AT&T fiber. I use their modem, right? I plug my firewall that I have purpose built. You know, we can get into the software on that.
Yeah.
But I have my firewall, and then I have my switches and all that, and my virtualization server is plugged into those switches in my rack. So you're right. The server sits between my devices and the internet. So all of that stuff is filtered through that for ad blocking and things like that.
So are you using Linux to host Microsoft Windows environments?
Yeah. So Proxmox is Linux based, and I'm running a Windows VM on that just as my jump box. Like I said, it's sort of like a lightweight terminal server.
Easy to administer.
Yeah. Yeah. Because if I want to get into, if I need to log into something, pull up Chrome. I've got a dashboard that has icons, quick icons to all my stuff that I would need. Home labs dashboards are very popular with home labs because a lot of home labs have a lot of different things, and ain't nobody got time to remember all these bookmarks and all that stuff. So you want a nice front end interface that just shows you icons. Here's your router. Here's your switches. Here's your ad blocking, and it takes you where you need to go. So it's sort of like my
so is it lay it out in kind of a infrastructure diagram flow chart sort of way?
You can do it that way, or you can just say here's a button to go there.
Yeah.
So sort of just like on your phone, your apps are just shortcuts. That's all it is.
Yeah,
so.
That's pretty sweet. It makes it a lot easier, so you can track down any device on your network pretty quickly by doing that. If you've got IoT stuff out there,
I'm using the
cameras.
I'm using all the Unify stack. Other than the router, everything in my network is Unify. Switches, access points, cloud key, all that stuff. All the same stuff we use here.
Yeah.
For our clients. I mean, I've been using Unify before we started using it.
So all your cameras.
I actually don't have any. I have the Nest cameras because I've got their doorbell and everything.
Because you already had it.
Yeah.
Probably.
I don't have any of the Unify cameras.
Yeah.
Could.
I've used them.
Yeah.
And they work. Yeah, we use them. So
that's cool.
They work pretty well. So what are some common mistakes people make when building their first home server, and how can those mistakes be avoided?
Yeah. So number one, RAID is not a backup. So ask me how I know.
But it is.
Yeah.
Come on, we can mirror the data.
Right. But what happens when the data...
Just go RAID 1.
Yeah, what happens when the data itself is bad, and it's like, well, sure, the bad data...
You still got to have redundancy outside of the RAID.
So I learned the hard way that we definitely need, you definitely need offsite backups. I have a solution for that that's really cool. A friend of mine has a similar type setup as me, and we have a connection between our networks, and we use a portion of our network attached storage as offsite backups for the other person, which is cool.
Okay.
So it's scheduled. It just runs and sends it over the internet. He lives in Pennsylvania somewhere, So I back up his stuff. He backs up mine. Works out for both of us.
Any other mistakes that you've made over the years?
Yeah, I mean, don't. So if you're interested in getting into home labbing, I mean, it's and I keep using this word, home labs, and that's basically just a home network that is built around business grade or enterprise grade hardware for the purposes of tinkering or automation, virtualization, that kind of stuff. But
so this isn't a production network. This is a network that's isolated.
Some of it is.
Okay.
Yeah. So I definitely do have a production network where tablets, desktops, laptops, all the stuff we have at our house runs on that. But I absolutely do have an IoT network, and that's the next thing I was going to get into. Number one, when you're starting off, you don't have to go crazy with the hardware. Start small. Get an old laptop, right? Don't just go to eBay and just purchase a $7,000 server, But because it's all scalable, right? Mm-hmm. You can just upgrade whenever you want. But as far as the network segmentation goes, all of my Amazon Echoes and all my automation stuff, as far as lighting or anything that plays music or does some kind of smart home feature, is all in its own separate VLAN or virtual LAN. So it cannot communicate with my production network. I can get to it, but it can't get to me, right?
And can you tell me why you have it separated like that?
Yeah, for sure. So I spoke about the Nest stuff earlier. So my Nest thermostat, that just is on my Wi-Fi network, the IoT Wi-Fi. So if Nest gets compromised, right, and someone gets access to my thermostat, if it were on the production network, they could theoretically get to everything, right? Because it is on its own isolated network. IoT means Internet of Things, a bunch of devices. Because it's isolated, even if that were to get compromised, they would only have access to that.
just to the
Right.
thermostat, so
Yeah.
they could heat or cool you.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Anything that's cloud facing, I have isolated.
You know, it's interesting that you bring that up because, you know, a lot of folks out there use baby cams. And this is
And those are
something I'm
compromised
thinking of.
all the time.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Compromised all the time. And
Because
and
people don't know how to keep up with firmware updates
Yeah.
and security and all that stuff. You know.
and they're watching that room that
Yeah.
the baby's in.
can
So
talk to
they're
'em.
learning more about and they're listening.
Yeah.
So-
It's scary.
So, how has building and maintaining a home server impacted your understanding of enterprise level server environments? Like,
Immense.
obviously, immensely.
Yeah.
I mean, this is kind of a dumb,
It's not
kind of a dumb
It's
question.
a great
because-
question actually, because like I can test a lot of stuff on my own, right? Before it may even be
Yeah.
a super popular thing in the enterprise. And for example, Unify, I started using Unify long before we used it here, and I mentioned it to you, and we vetted the product. You know, when it was ready for us to use as a business, we started using it, right? So I've been able to apply my tinkering knowledge to stuff at Digital Boardwalk all the time. I mean, there's so many times when I've been messing with a virtual machine or anything, and a weird error comes up, and I would not have ever seen that in any other context,
Yeah.
right? And then it happens here, and someone's like, "What is this?" And I'm like, "Oh, that's easy. Hit this, done, fix." Because I've seen it before,
because you've
right?
seen it.
Yeah, and it's just because I have a passion for always learning and seeing how things work and just messing around. I mean, you can't be afraid to break stuff. That's another thing. You mentioned mistakes earlier. You cannot be afraid to break stuff. That's the whole point of this. You know?
Colby, how long have you been at Digital Boardwalk?
This is my 11th year.
11 years. And, you know, it's interesting that you say that because obviously sticking around at Digital Boardwalk, one of the things that we've noticed with you is you have a passion. And we know that you tinker outside of work because you wouldn't know all the
Right.
things that you know without doing that.
Yep.
So this isn't a scripted question. I'm ad-libbing here.
Oh, okay.
But what would you tell our audience that wants to get in IT, you know, how important it is to have a home lab growing up well before you're planning to go professional with your career? Like, just...
I've always been one of those people that believes in cross-training. Specializations are great, right?
Yeah.
They're great. But I've been in situations before where something is broken and the guy or the gal who knows this thing inside and out, that's their whole job, isn't available, right?
Yeah.
I've always been I've always believed in the jack of all trades.
I don't want to wait.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't want the labor pains. I just want the baby. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? So I've always believed in just broadening all of your abilities.
Yeah.
So I mean, I do specialize in network infrastructure, servers, that kind of stuff. But I mean, I also have messed around a little bit with, creating Docker containers and things like that. So I've done a lot.
Yeah, and that hits home for me because I don't like to wait either. I mean, I know if, for instance, on a vehicle, I just put brand new speed sensors in all my wheels on my Jeep and jacked that thing up and ripped some stuff apart and redid it all because I didn't want to wait. And I'm not a mechanic.
Yeah, that's funny that you mentioned
I
that, 'cause
YouTubed it.
I'm looking into doing a slight lift on my pickup truck.
Yeah,
So I've been
it's pretty straightforward.
So I've been
You need to go 4 inches if you're going
when
slight. Right?
I was thinking 2.5. 3.
2.5. I'm joking.
My one of my brothers-in-law has a 6-inch lift on his truck, and it's like, bro, it's nuts.
Sway.
Yeah.
We're getting off topic,
Yeah, let's
ladies
go.
and gentlemen. Sorry, because this show's all about getting nerdy, and it doesn't matter what we get nerdy with. We just get nerdy.
This is good. This is really good. I like this.
You like that? Well,
Yep.
I can get you a whole can of it after the show.
Oh, cool. Okay.
We don't want you to get too. I see you got that look in your eye, so I don't
I'm
want you to get
fine,
too
everyone.
intoxicated for the show.
For those
here, Cole.
listening only, I'm fine. And I realize that's exactly what someone who's not fine would say. But
So, all right. So, share a specific example where your home server setup helped you solve a real world problem. Now, you kind of led into it a minute ago. You said it helps you every day up at Digital Boardwalk because it's something you already encountered at home. So that would be a good.
yeah, so I use I use Plex to play all of my media.
Yeah.
Right. I rip a bunch of Blu-rays or have a bunch of music that I've accumulated over the years. Without getting super technical, there was a exploit or vulnerability in one of the like older Plex versions, right? My setup is done in such a way that it automatically updates itself anyway. But even if I hadn't, I manually applied this fix via my pfSense router that 99% of routers out there wouldn't have been able to do.
Right.
So basically, there's a plugin or a package that I have installed on my router that allows me to limit connectivity based on geolocation, right? So even if I have a port open, like let's say I wanted to host
That is the nerdiest
know.
thing I think I've ever heard on this show.
So even if I wanted to host a website, right, I could allow it so only U.S. people could get in, not other countries, that kind of stuff. So I sort of hardened my Plex server by blocking other countries from being able to connect to it before the vulnerability would have taken effect.
Yeah.
Right.
That makes sense. So,
Yeah.
all right.
I told
so,
you. I'm not a normal person. I totally acknowledge that with this kind of stuff.
So, before we end this segment, one more question. What are the key factors to consider when deciding whether to build a physical server or set up a virtual one in the cloud? Like, what is going to make me want to go virtual versus going physical?
So,
besides the obvious, which is cost.
I would argue there is no argument. There is no pro physical server argument anymore, ever. Because computers, servers, whatever, desktop computer, even, laptops, even if they're 3 or 4 years old, they are still so much more powerful than what installing one operating system can do. In other words, you're leaving hardware on the table by not virtualizing, right?
Right.
A laptop can easily run 8 Linux VMs like in its sleep to do specific things.
Yeah.
So it may not be the answer you were looking for, but to me the answer to me the answer is always to virtualize.
I think that's exactly the answer I was looking for,
cool.
because for instance, when Digital Boardwalk was starting back in 2009, 2010, it was all about physical.
Yeah.
Everything was still, we're talking 15 years ago.
I remember taking servers out to a place and all they do is host files.
And now what do we do?
Yeah, it's
all VMs.
If we're not doing a virtual machine, it's like what's going on here?
Yeah. Or consolidating,
and even if
we're still running into physical
even
servers.
Even if you're not breaking up the hardware and you are just running one virtual machine, it's infinitely easier to migrate a virtual machine than it is a physical machine. It's infinitely easier. And backup as well.
I'm going to use that as a segue into the second segment. We're going to talk routers, NAS, and SANs. But before we do, let's grab another beer, Edge.
All right, guys. So our next beer is the Gulf Coast Blonde from the brewery Docks Hop Shop in Pensacola, Florida. They describe this beer as a beach beer, a fishing beer, and a backyard beer. You get the idea.
More refreshing than that one.
I've had this beer several times before, and it is totally that. This is a boat beer. This is a refreshing beer. This is a pool beer. Repeat the name of it, Tim, so our audience can listen to it and order more of it.
It is the Gulf Coast Blonde. It has a low enough ABV that you won't hook yourself.
Nice. It's very good.
Well, I'm hooked.
I don't have a lot of I'm not very good at describing things other than this beer is good, so that's what I'm going to go with. It's very easy to drink, just like that last one.
People appreciate a man a few words.
Yeah, if only
this
that were
beer
me.
has notes of simplicity and energetic optimism.
Yeah, it's good, everyone.
So, DIY networking.
Mm-hmm.
Let's dive deep. Let's get in. Let's get nerdy. What inspired you to start building your own router or NAS at home, and how did you get started?
So I got tired of constantly having to upgrade an off-the-shelf router solution because I kept overloading them, I guess.
Tell the audience what that means. It's traffic, right?
Yeah, I'm about to. So you remember the old like Linux, Linksys like stackable router. They were like blue and like
I hated blue. They were blue and black.
yeah, yeah,
Isn't there a song about that? Blue and black.
blue on black. Yeah.
blue on black.
So I got to the point where, the hardware just couldn't keep up with what I needed it to do. It was limited it had a very small amount of memory, like to the point where it was like 16 megabytes of RAM. That's insane. And this was not that long ago, maybe 20 years. I mean, by then computers were at least 1 or 2 gigabytes. The router should have, you should not be bottlenecked by your most important network device. You know what I mean? So anyway, I did some research on building a router. And you remember Andrew Smith? He worked with us for a little bit. He
built the jail here.
No, that's the other Andrew. Old Andrew Smith. Other building.
Okay.
But yeah, anyway, he told me about this software called PF Sense.
Yeah.
And I had heard about it, but I hadn't talked to anyone who'd used it. And this was in 2013. I had just started here. And I did some research. I went to eBay and I found a WatchGuard Firebox. I'm sure you've heard the name. Those routers typically run their own like proprietary software. It's all licensed to pay.
That's why I don't like them.
Yeah, but they had the capability to run PF Sense. So bought a used firewall on eBay, installed it, and I've been running it ever since. I've changed physical devices over the years, but I've been using the software and watched it grow for the last 11 years. And it's just so flexible, so powerful. I will never switch unless some other software comes along and it just blows out of the water. There's just no reason for me to switch.
So you're building these things yourself. You're buying used hardware to house them.
Or new hardware, yeah. I just got a new one a couple weeks ago. I bought so the little tiny computers that we typically sell?
Yeah.
So I bought something that's similar to that, like $200 on Amazon. It's got 2.5 gigabit network ports on it.
Right.
One for the internet, one for the local. Runs a little Intel N100 CPU, 16 gigs of RAM, nothing crazy, just it's overkill for what PFSense needs.
Right.
6 watts. It just sips power. Doesn't, and it's my router now.
So is there cost savings associated with this versus paying, a company that develops their own router?
Well, it's free. It's free. So you just the software is open source.
But you still got to put it on hardware.
Yeah. The hardware obviously you pay for, but I mean how many? What's that Netgear Nighthawk cost? Like $300. I mean, those things aren't cheap either. Yeah. So yeah, it's about the same.
So it's about the same, but you're according to what you're saying, you're getting more power and flexibility out of it.
Way more usage. Yeah.
So tell me about the difference between a commercial router and a custom-built router in terms of performance and flexibility.
Well, I mean, you're definitely going to get the support with the off-the-shelf solution, right? We sell Fortinets here, right? And Fortinets are great because the way they handle the way the firewall rules work is exactly like PFSense. Yeah. So I know those just like the back of my hand, right?
I think an engineer there that developed that was probably going, hey, why don't we just... Yeah,
and that's where the name came from. They want to make sense out of packet filtering, right? PF sense, right? That's where the name comes from. So yeah, with a commercial solution, you're going to get support, you're going to get firmware updates, that kind of stuff. On a DIY solution, it's all up to you to maintain it and things like that. But this particular solution that I use has a really great community, really good developers. They're always pushing out security updates. I've always found that, you shouldn't be tied. You shouldn't be anti-open source just because you can't monetize it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I love whenever we get a Fortinet we have to install for a client here. It's always nice because I know that they're going to be able to do the job, and I know those firewalls really well
they're badass
because of my PFSense experience. So it's great.
So for someone new to DIY networking, what are the first steps to take when planning a home-built router or shared network storage?
Pick your hardware solution. You can buy a PFSense router. Like there is hardware that the software. The company that owns the PFSense software is called Netgate. They make their own hardware as well. You don't have to DIY it. You can buy from them. Right. So decide if you want to, pay them for their hardware or, choose your own based on your use case. How fast is your internet? How fast do you want your, local devices to be able to communicate? That kind of stuff. So I would say start with the hardware, but also make sure that whatever software solution you choose is fully vetted, and whether you're going to go with a free solution or a subscription-based solution, whatever. Just do your research and make sure there's no vulnerabilities and things like that, or if there are, they're fixed.
I kind of feel like if you're not gonna recycle old hardware and make your own router, you're kind of half-assing a home lab.
That 100%. Especially for the purposes of home labs, like you can just grab an old desktop, like Dell Optiplex is my go-to for people.
They're cheap.
I tell them, hey, go get a Dell Optiplex, throw in one of those half-height dual NICs, because they only come with one network adapter, and you need two, WAN and LAN.
Yeah.
Technically, you can do it with one if you have a managed switch and all that, but that's a whole thing with VLANs. You can actually do it with one, but that's way too down the rabbit hole.
Right.
It's easier just to plug in two cables. So
Well, I think talking about research, where outside of some of the
r/home lab.
all right, say it again.
Reddit, I can't.
I love Reddit.
I can't believe I'm saying this because I've always felt like Reddit is
I go on there every day.
I always feel like Reddit's a cancer personally, but
It's like one of those things you.
It's not Reddit that.
Well,
it's not Reddit that's the problem. It's usually the people. As with anything,
I was
home
gonna
lab
say that.
is a great solution. Also, as cliche as this is going to sound, Google is your friend, dude. Like you can just find so many
YouTube.
resources.
Yeah, YouTube.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, I found. I mean, shoot, we built this studio with using YouTube.
Yeah.
So, I didn't. These mics are incredible.
I've watched many a YouTube video on how to spin up a site-to-site VPN tunnel with pfSense or whatever. So absolutely.
Yeah, actually, there's a really charismatic, cool guy that will show you how to install a Remy Halo bulb in your air conditioning unit if you can find it on.
Oh yeah,
yeah.
I'll have to go look for
His
that.
name's Tim Shoup.
I'm pretty sure I've seen that one.
So, what's the biggest mistake you've made in a DIY network project, and what did you learn from that experience?
Great question, and this is my go-to. I always have this answer. It will always be this. I decided just on a whim to implement VLANs at home. I already had the pfSense router, had all of the. I wasn't using Unify yet. I was using HP ProCurve switches at the time.
Okay.
Totally, good solution. I was using Unify access points. I hadn't gotten the switches yet because, they are not the cheapest of switches, and there's a reason because they're amazing. Anyway, I decided to add VLANs because I was, we were about to have a son. I was installing some baby monitoring stuff and all this other, IoT stuff at the time, 2014-ish, right?
Okay.
I wanted to add some security, so I wanted to do VLANs. I knew how to do VLANs from a switching perspective, but I've never done VLANs inside pfSense because I'd never had a need to. Created the VLAN, put all the config in place, had all the firewall rules in place, and then plugged everything in the way that physically it was plugged in it was plugged in correctly, right? Not incorrectly. You know what I'm saying? Had it all hooked up right. Couldn't get an IP address to save my life. Could not pull an IP address from the router. And it was just a simple firewall rule mistake that I had made. But I'm gonna blame pfSense for this one.
Oh,
because
you got to point a finger.
So when you basically when you make
this is what an IT guy does.
Oh yeah, it's
he
never
points,
my fault. Yeah, it totally was my fault. The way that this router platform works, if you don't give it access specifically, like if you don't tell it it's allowed, it's blocked, right? Yeah. So when I made the firewall rule to allow this VLAN to get online and to work, when you make a rule in pfSense, by default, it only selects the TCP protocol, which is not part of DHCP, pulling an IP address. I only allowed a TCP, not UDP, not ICMP for pings, stuff like that.
Okay.
So I literally handcuffed myself by just choosing the wrong pull down. And it is TCP by default, but I should have seen that I needed all the protocols, right?
Right.
And I didn't know.
So why did you? What made you do that?
Maybe do what?
What made you make those choices when you were doing the?
Oh, well, because like I said, I
There's
wanted
a point to this.
I wanted the VLANs for the security,
Right.
and when I made the firewall rule, I didn't read through it all the way.
Right.
I said, oh, they know what they're doing. Click, 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 and I didn't read it properly.
But that sounds all too familiar. I mean, to any DIYer out there, right?
Yeah.
I mean, we've all gone, well, I don't need to.
I don't need the instructions.
Yeah, I don't
Yeah.
need the instructions.
Yeah.
I'm going to do what makes common sense, and then common
Right.
sense doesn't solve the problem, and then you go back to the instructions and go, well, that's stupid. Why would I do that? And then you
Yeah.
do it, and it works.
And I looked at the rule, and I was like, it's basically like it's the equivalent of my lawnmower won't start because it had no gas in it.
Yeah.
You know. And it was just like, okay.
I
click,
figured you'd
fix.
have an electric lawnmower.
Well, I do, but I didn't. But I didn't. I didn't want to go down that road.
So how does building and maintaining your own networking equipment compare to using off-the-shelf solutions in terms of learning and hands-on experience? Now, we already got into this.
Yeah.
You said you were able to like create and have more power and this and that.
Yeah.
But
it's sort of like, God, I'm about to go super nerdy here, but okay. The difference between George Lucas Star Wars and Disney Star Wars, right? George
Yes.
Lucas Star Wars is good. Disney Star Wars is not. And that's because George Lucas created it. Disney didn't, right? So
Right.
if you just go out and just buy a off-the-shelf router platform, you may plug it in properly, you may get it online, and it may work. But you're not the one that you didn't choose that specific network card because that card works with that software,
Right.
Or this specific speed processor because you need it for something. You don't know the ins and outs of it. When you build your own router, or build your own computer in general, you know it more. You know what components you chose the components on purpose, right?
yeah,
So you're just intimately familiar with it as opposed to just buying something.
Yeah. You're in tune
Yeah.
to the end result.
Yep.
Whereas Disney
Right.
is churning.
They don't understand what made it popular in the first place.
No, they just know how to monetize.
Exactly. Yeah.
Exactly. So before we get into our next beer, we're gonna end this segment with what are your thoughts on the future of home networking, particularly in the context of DIY setups and the growing importance of data privacy. So data, we talked about baby cams.
Mhm.
I mean, that's that's bigger than data privacy.
Right.
That's your children.
Yeah. That's
So
an actual personal threat.
so future home networking, context of DIY setups, and the growing importance of data privacy. This is a loaded question, but there's so many ways you can attack it.
Man, there's so many different angles to this. Number one, builders, when they build a new home, it shouldn't be optional to install the Ethernet cabling. In 2024, when a new home is installed, it should be required.
But
But
what about Wi-Fi?
yeah, and Wi-Fi is great, but what people don't realize or may not realize is that wireless actually has quite a bit of wires in it, right? So houses need to be wired, just the same way that builders had to start learning how to run phone cabling, right? In the 50s and 60s, every house, houses were getting phones, right?
Yeah.
Every house needs to be Cat 6 at least today. It just needs to be home run. None of this.
Yeah, I think
stuff,
so too.
And they need to have a dedicated panel in their, in a closet somewhere that has a patch panel to plug into, and that way they can at least get a small network going, and they're not relying on Wi-Fi for everything.
But they need to think about
But-
access point locations and things
Absolutely.
like that,
Yes.
because I feel like doing that as an afterthought, there's so much, it's so labor intensive.
Right, it's so much easier to run cables when the studs are there, and there's no drywall and things like that. It should just be part of the build, right?
But Wi-Fi is so fast now, Colby.
It can be, but I'm telling you, Wi-Fi's. I'm going to use quotes. Wi-Fi's never going to be as fast as hardline. It just, every time there's a new Wi-Fi standard, there's a new wired standard. You want to talk, 1.2 gigabit on wireless? I have 100. I can do 100 gigabit.
Right.
You know what I mean? So
I remember a time when I
I can't
had
do 100 gigabit. I wish.
when I had 3 devices on a network,
Yeah.
and now I have 60 plus
Right.
devices
Your
on a
TV,
network.
your
Yeah.
freaking smartwatch, your thermostat, your everything is wireless now.
So being able to what's the word I'm looking for, to being able to manage the traffic that not only travels across your Wi-Fi but also your Ethernet, and being able to kind of diversify where that traffic is going.
Yeah, that's where the solution that I use comes in a lot, because, and I know a lot of people just aren't technical, right? And they just want to plug something in and have it work. And these days, that's usually how easy it is, right? But you can't have convenience and security. You got to pick one. You can do a little bit of a happy medium, but you can't have both just full on, right? And people need to educate themselves. They need to learn how important it is to, like, segment traffic and not just have, you need a guest Wi-Fi. When friends come over, you shouldn't be putting them on your I'm going to use production Wi-Fi, right? You should have a guest Wi-Fi.
Yeah.
You should have an IoT Wi-Fi for all of your little smart things. Most off-the-shelf router solutions, they may give you a guest one, but it's just not flexible enough to be able to secure it properly.
That's a perfect segue into our last segment. But before, we're going to talk about expanding and innovating in your home lab before we go into our rapid fire questions. Before that, Edge, we need another beer.
All right, guys. So our last beer of today is the New Zealand Pilsner by the Crooked Stave Brewing Company. They describe it as a new approach to a traditional style. This crisp Pilsner is dry hopped with a Maltueka from New Zealand, resulting in a distinct and refreshing lemon-lime profile.
I was going to say, there's definitely some lemon lime there.
New Zealand is definitely on my bucket list to travel to.
God, dude, if I, me,
This one's good.
we've had this conversation before. I don't fly. If I could just teleport to New Zealand, I would. Lord of the Rings is probably the best film franchise I've ever seen, and that place is just incredible. Some other world.
Whoa. You said Lord of the Rings is better than Star Wars?
Oh God, that is another show, guys.
Yeah, we could make the argument either way for the original trilogy, but Lord of the Rings has got to be up there, the top 3 trilogies of all time, if not number 1.
When I was in boot camp in the Navy many, many moons ago, you have to fill out your dream sheet, and your dream sheet is your top 3 locations you'd like to go to post boot camp. So I put New Zealand, Germany, and Hawaii, and they sent me to Oklahoma.
I thought you went to Germany. Or you lived in Germany.
No, I lived in Germany for many years when my dad served in the civil service back in the early 80s, but I had it also on my list.
Oklahoma.
As an adult, they sent me to Oklahoma, and I said, wait a minute, there's no ocean.
Yeah.
Is there an ocean in Oklahoma?
Well, yeah, what is the Navy going to do there?
I was stationed. I went to an Air Force base in the Navy, and that's what they call in the Navy. If any of you sailors are listening, that's what they call skate duty. So
interesting.
Yeah, skate duty is when you get the easy, easy off. Because stationed on an Air Force base, let me tell you something, it's easy peasy. So, expanding and innovating in your home lab, how do you approach documenting your experiments and projects in your home lab, and why is that so important to document? Oh my God.
Yeah. So that harkens back to the stuff about how things I do at home help me with the stuff I do here. This is actually the opposite. We document.
You learned it here.
Yeah. So we document here, and I use not the same solution just because I have no need to pay for all those licenses that we use for IT glue. But I take the similar approach where if it's not in the ticket, it didn't happen.
Yeah.
Right. So I have a Word document I keep up with when I make major changes and stuff.
Okay.
But I'm doing all kinds of stuff. Like I use Bitwarden for my password manager.
That's what I use.
I host it. I host it myself on my Unraid.
Of course you
server.
do.
Just because I don't want to pay for the service, and they allow you to use. They have they give you the source code, and if you're able to compile that yourself, then you get all the features for free. They won't support it because they're not selling it to you, but they fully are allowing you to compile the source code yourself and get everything. So I do that.
Yeah, you're probably a little less vulnerable too because you're not technically a target. So.
Yeah, I'm not using it in the cloud like all their customers are.
So, how do you stay updated with the latest trends and technologies to incorporate into your home lab?
Great question. We kind of touched on it earlier.
Talked about Reddit, how
yeah,
much you love it, and the people.
For me,
that-
it's mostly YouTube.
Yeah.
I go to Reddit anytime I have a problem that I can't just fix myself, just to see if anyone else has it. I've been doing a lot of Reddit lately with research on my frontier because I'm interested in lifting it. But YouTube, just I watch a lot of tech YouTube channels. Network Chuck, Tom Lawrence. I know you know Tom. Techno Tim is another one that's really cool. I don't know if you him.
No,
know him.
I haven't done that.
He's cool. He's kind of a weird.
I like
name,
his
though.
name.
And then we were right on top of that one. Yeah, it's YouTube for me. I watch a ton of instructional videos and not even that, just like informational videos on new vulnerabilities or new stuff that's out. And the other day I was watching one. This guy got he built a new small rack for testing, and he's like, "What should I do with this?" And some guy was like, "Hey, make a video on a whole home audio streaming solution using this software because it's perfect built for what he was doing." And I was like, "Oh, I haven't heard of that. It's called Mood. There's an E on the end, and the second O is capital. I don't know some of these names. It's so weird, but it's hosted on a Raspberry Pi, and that's not a pastry, folks. That's a little computer about the size of your phone.
Yeah, you can do a lot with Raspberry Pi.
And so I learned it in about an hour, and I've got a amplifier plugged into my digital analog converter, plugged into my Raspberry Pi, so I can have music anywhere I want in the house, and then using a nice web interface. Super cool.
So, what are some cost-effective ways to expand your home lab without breaking the bank?
Yeah, eBay. Honestly,
I love eBay.
You can find enterprise-grade hardware that is maybe 5 years old that still has tons of life left on it for pennies on the dollar compared to what it. When you look at the CPU that's in there, right? When it was brand new, that CPU cost $1,200, right?
Yeah.
You pay $200 for the entire server, including RAM, hard drive bays, rack rails, all that stuff,
So, discuss the importance of failure in the learning process within a home lab environment.
The importance of failure.
Yeah. Why is it important? I could talk about this all day long in terms of running businesses because I have failed more than I've succeeded. But in a home lab, you have to fail to figure out.
What is the happy wife, happy life, right? Don't ever mess with the internet when, unless there was a approved maintenance window.
Who turned off the internet?
Exactly. So, definitely plan your maintenance accordingly. Don't change more than one thing at a time.
Right. Because then you get confused.
Yep.
Right.
Yeah. Don't shotgun a problem, as I call it. If you're going to make a change, make one change. Did it fix it? Nope. Put it back.
Yeah. Exactly. How do you manage the physical space and organization of your home lab setup? So let's talk about instead of talking about all the virtual and the knowledge and the education, what about the physical actual setup?
Physically housing it. Yeah, absolutely. Ed, you've been over to my house. I have technically our house is 4 bedrooms, but one of those bedrooms is really an office that they call a bedroom.
Right.
It has a closet, so it's a bedroom, right? That room is in the front of the house, and our house faces west, so it's way too hot in there because the sun just destroys that room.
Right.
So I was like, this seems like a good place to put a bunch of expensive equipment. I put a dedicated AC unit in there and all that stuff. But anyway, I gutted out the closet, got rid of the shelving stuff, and put a rack in there. So I've got my servers, all my cables run to patch panels, all my equipment is rack mounted. So it's just sitting in a closet. And I have a cooling solution in there, just like you would at in a business. So
are your pinball tables in there too?
They are. It's funny. So my wife told me I can buy as many pinball machines as I want as long as they fit in one room. I'm only getting one room, right?
How big is the room? How many square feet?
I don't know, 10 by 14 maybe.
Okay,
it's a dining room, and we don't ever eat there.
Yeah.
So I was like, we don't use this room for anything. So that's my pinball room. Yeah.
Yeah, that wouldn't fly in my house.
I'm very fortunate, man. I'm the luckiest guy in the world. I'm telling you. I am, dude.
Wouldn't fly in my house. You need to. Kathleen, I hope you listen to this show.
I'm actually downsizing too. I technically have 2 machines right now. I had 4 as of like 2 months ago. I wasn't playing 2 other ones, so I sold them. And Brian Farley, Emily's husband, he bought my Royal Rumble.
Okay.
He's in Washington, so I'm holding it for him until he can go get it. But I still have Deadpool. Deadpool's bolted to the floor. That's not going anywhere. So
That's pretty cool. I still need to get the black hole. That'll be my
dude,
one.
I sent you that.
I know.
When you told me about it, they're not cheap though, man. They are so expensive.
That was my first real joy of playing pinball.
There's another
was
one
black
that's the
hole.
exact same called Haunted House.
Oh yeah, I played that.
Have you
I've
been
played
to Play, the arcade bar in Pensacola that's relatively new?
The Grid? Or
The
Grid.
The Grid.
Yes, it's on Pace. Yeah, it's a great place.
They expanded the back room since the last time I've been there, and they have a whole bunch.
I have not been there.
We
yet.
could do a whole podcast on pinball.
All right, we're not going to talk about it. Actually, before the show, we were talking about waxing your pinball surface because those balls tear it up. So rapidly.
Always keep your balls waxed. There's no other way to put it, Tim.
I don't wax my balls. I powder them.
All right, next segment.
All right. Yeah, we may have to cut that part. I don't know. So we're going to go into our rapid fire.
Oh, that wasn't rapid fire. Okay.
No, this is rapid fire. We're looking for one word to one sentence answers. We're going to shoot through them quick. So are you ready, Mr. Colby Sullivan? All right, don't look at my screen. Look straight ahead. First question, favorite OS?
Windows 10.
I see you more as a Windows ME kind of guy.
Oh, yeah. ME was great. Come on, man. 98 3rd edition.
What did it stand for?
Millennium edition.
Mistake edition?
Yeah. I thought you were actually asking me.
Preferred router?
PFSense.
All right, I think I knew that. Top protocol?
Top protocol. DHCP. Because you got to have an IP address, right?
We need to give him another beer.
No, I'm good.
Edge. Go-to tool. Your go-to tool.
Oh, I'm thinking go-to like the...
I know what you think. Go-to tool.
Linus Tech Tips.
Okay.
Ratcheting screwdriver. Use it every day.
Yeah, you were in here bragging about it one day. And last but not least, dream setup.
Oh,
Come on. One sentence.
Wireless power. Just no wires. Nothing.
I thought you said everything needs.
That is a prior Nerds on Tap show.
What?
We talk about wireless power.
There you go. Yeah. Minimalistic. I don't like clutter, and I can't seem to get it right at home.
So, ladies and gentlemen, that concludes this episode of Nerds on Tap. I hope we got nerdy enough for you in this hour. And, if you have any questions, feel free to write into the show. I know this episode will probably prompt several questions, especially if you're trying to build a DIY home setup or lab at home. Colby?
Yeah, I'd love to help you guys out. Totally, yeah.
Do you have any last words for our audience here?
Don't be afraid to tinker, Get in there, get your hands dirty, break stuff. That's the only way you're going to learn.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you, Colby, for being on the show. Thank you, Tim Edge, for serving up some fantastic beers today. Ladies and gentlemen, I hope you enjoyed the show, and please join us on our next episode where we will talk about something nerdy. Thank you. Cheers, my fellow nerds and beer lovers. Stay tuned for more Nerds on Tap. Oh, and one more thing. Help us spread the nerdy love and the love for great brews by sharing this podcast with your friends, colleagues, and fellow beer enthusiasts. Let's build a community that embraces curiosity, innovation, and the enjoyment of a cold one.